The noose swayed in the Wyoming wind like a promise of death, and Preston Reed knew he was staring at the woman who would change his life forever before she even spoke a word. He had ridden into Custer that morning of July 1876, with nothing but his horse, his rifle, and a heart so hollow it echoed with every hoofbeat. The town square buzzed with the kind of ugly excitement that came before a hanging, and Preston pushed through the crowd more out of morbid curiosity than any sense of justice. He had seen too many deaths in his 32 years to feel much about another one. But when he saw her standing on that platform, hands bound behind her back, and chin raised in defiance despite the terror in her eyes, something shifted in his chest. She could not have been more than 25, with dark hair that had come loose from its pins and green eyes that swept over the crowd like she was memorizing every face that had come to watch her die. What did she do? Preston asked the man next to him, a shopkeeper by the looks of his clean hands and pressed shirt. Killed her husband, the man said with relish. Shot him 3 times. Sheriff says it was cold-blooded murder. Preston watched as the woman's chest rose and fell with rapid breaths. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, and he could see bruises on her arms even from where he stood. Cold-blooded. He doubted that very much. The sheriff, a barrel-chested man with a thick mustache, climbed the platform steps. Amelia Jenkins, you have been found guilty of murder. Have you any last words? Her voice carried across the square, steady despite the tremor Preston could see in her hands. I am guilty of surviving. If that is a crime in this territory, then I accept my fate. But I will not apologize for refusing to die at the hands of a monster. A few people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Preston felt his jaw tighten. He had heard stories like this before, had even lived through variations of them. Men who used their fists to keep their wives in line, and a law that looked the other way as long as it was done behind closed doors. The sheriff placed the noose around her neck, and Preston found himself moving forward before his mind caught up with his body. Wait. His voice cut through the murmuring crowd. The sheriff paused, irritation flashing across his face. This is official business, stranger. Step back. Preston climbed the platform steps, his boots heavy on the wood. He had no plan, no idea what he was about to do, but he could not stand there and watch this woman die. There is another way. According to territorial law, a woman sentenced to hang can be pardoned if a man of good standing agrees to marry her and take responsibility for her actions. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. That is an old law, barely used anymore, but still valid. Preston turned to look at Amelia Jenkins for the first time up close. Her eyes were the color of pine trees in summer, and they stared at him with a mixture of hope and suspicion. I am Preston Reed. I own land up in the mountains, have no debts, and no criminal record. I am willing to marry this woman and take her into my custody. You do not even know her, the sheriff said. No, Preston agreed, but I know enough. The crowd erupted into whispers. Amelia's lips parted, but no sound came out. Preston could see the rapid pulse at her throat, right above where the rope rested. This is highly irregular, the sheriff said, but Preston could see him wavering. A hanging always brought complications, paperwork, questions from the territorial governor. This would be easier for everyone. The law is the law, Preston said, unless you want to explain to the governor why you ignored a legal petition for mercy. The sheriff's face reddened, but after a long moment he removed the noose from Amelia's neck. Fine, but she is your responsibility now. Anything she does, any crime she commits, falls on your head. Understood? Within an hour, Preston found himself standing in the small church at the edge of town, with Amelia Jenkins beside him and a tired-looking preacher reciting words that would bind them together until death. She had not spoken to him since the platform, had only stared at him with those searching green eyes as if trying to understand what kind of man would marry a complete stranger. Preston wondered the same thing about himself. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Preston did not kiss her. It seemed too much, too intimate for what this was. Instead, he nodded once and turned to sign the papers that would make it legal. Outside, his horse waited where he had left it tied to the hitching post. He untied the reins and looked at Amelia, who stood on the church steps as if unsure what to do next. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Yes." Her voice was hoarse, probably from fear and the pressure of the noose. Preston felt an unfamiliar surge of protectiveness. "We will need to get you a horse. Mine can carry us both for now, but it is a long way to my ranch." "Where is your ranch?" "Up in the Medicine Bow Mountains, about 2 days' ride from here." She nodded slowly, then descended the steps. Preston mounted first, then offered her his hand. Her fingers were cold despite the July heat, and he pulled her up behind him with ease. She settled onto the horse's back, her body rigid with tension. "You can hold on," he said. "I will not bite." After a moment's hesitation, her arms came around his waist. They felt thin, too thin, and Preston wondered when she had last eaten a proper meal. They rode out of Custer with the sun high overhead, leaving behind the whispers and stares. Preston focused on the trail ahead, on the familiar path that would take them home, but he was acutely aware of the woman pressed against his back. She smelled of fear and sweat and something floral he could not place. After an hour of silence, she finally spoke. "Why did you do it?" Preston considered his answer carefully. "Because it was not right what they were going to do to you. You do not know what I did." "I know what you said you did." Survived. Her grip on him tightened slightly. "My husband was not a good man. He drank, and when he drank, he used his fists. For 3 years I endured it. I prayed, I tried to be a better wife, I did everything the preacher said, but nothing changed. It only got worse." Preston said nothing, just listened. That night he came home drunk as usual, but this time he had his gun. He said he was tired of my face, tired of my voice, tired of everything about me. He pointed it at my head. Her voice cracked and she paused. "I do not remember grabbing the other gun. I do not remember pulling the trigger. I just remember the sound, and then he was on the floor, and there was blood everywhere. 3 times, they said. I must have kept pulling the trigger. I do not remember. The next thing I knew, the sheriff was there, and they were dragging me away." Preston guided his horse around a fallen log. "Did you tell the sheriff what happened? That it was self-defense?" "I tried. But my husband was liked in town. He was charming when he was sober, always helping people, always friendly. No one wanted to believe that he would hurt me. And the bruises, well, those could have come from anywhere, could they not?" The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. "A woman's word against a dead man's reputation. I never stood a chance." "You do now," Preston said quietly. They rode on in silence after that, and Preston felt her gradually relax against him. By the time the sun began to set, she was leaning heavily on his back, exhausted from the day's ordeal. They stopped to make camp near a stream, and Preston helped her down from the horse. She swayed on her feet, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning, I think. Time has become strange." Preston led her to a fallen log and made her sit. "Stay here. I will get a fire going and make us some food." She watched him work with those careful eyes, and Preston felt the weight of her gaze as he built the fire and pulled out his supplies. He had dried meat, beans, and coffee. Nothing fancy, but enough to keep them going. As the beans heated in his small pot, he noticed her shivering despite the warm evening air. He pulled his bedroll from his horse and draped it around her shoulders. She looked up at him, startled, and he saw tears glimmering in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Preston nodded and turned back to the fire, unsure how to respond to her gratitude. He was not used to people thanking him. He was not used to people at all, really. He had spent the last 5 years alone on his ranch, content with the company of his horses and cattle, never venturing into town unless absolutely necessary. His wife had died 7 years ago, along with their unborn child. Fever had taken them both within a week, and Preston had buried them on a hillside overlooking the valley. After that, he had sold their small farm in Kansas and headed west, looking for somewhere remote enough that he would not have to think about what he had lost. The Medicine Bow Mountains had given him that solitude. His ranch was profitable enough, raising horses and running a small herd of cattle, but he lived simply. No neighbors for miles, no reason to interact with anyone beyond the occasional trip to sell his stock. So why had he saved this woman? He still was not entirely sure. Maybe it was because he saw something familiar in her eyes, that look of someone who had endured too much. Maybe it was because he was tired of being alone, even if he would not admit it to himself. Or maybe it was just because it was the right thing to do, and Preston Reed still believed in doing the right thing, even when the world made it hard. They ate in silence, and Preston noticed Amelia forcing herself to eat slowly when he could tell she wanted to devour every bite. When they finished, he poured her coffee and watched as she wrapped her hands around the tin cup, seeking its warmth. "Tell me about your ranch," she said finally. Preston leaned back against his saddle. "It is not much. A cabin, a barn, some pasture land. I raise horses mostly, sell them to the army and to ranchers looking for good stock. Run about 50 head of cattle, too. You have help?" "No, I manage on my own." She studied him in the firelight. "That must be lonely." "I prefer it that way, did you? Before today." Her question hit too close to home, and Preston looked away. "We should get some rest. We have a long day of riding tomorrow." He gave her his bedroll and took only his blanket for himself, lying down on the opposite side of the fire. He could hear her settling in, the rustle of fabric and the soft sounds of her breathing. "Preston," her voice came through the darkness. "Yes. I will try to be a good wife. I know this is not what you wanted, but I will work hard. I can cook and clean and help with the animals. I will earn my keep." Preston stared up at the stars, bright and cold above them. "You do not owe me anything, Amelia. You just need to heal." She did not respond, and eventually he heard her breathing even out into sleep. But Preston lay awake for a long time, wondering what he had gotten himself into and trying not to think about how right it had felt to have someone's arms around him again, even if it was a stranger running from death. The next day dawned clear and hot, and they set out early. Amelia was quiet, but Preston noticed her watching everything with keen attention, taking in the landscape, the way he handled the horse, the path they followed. She was observant, intelligent, and Preston found himself wondering what her life had been like before her marriage, before everything went wrong. They stopped midday to rest the horse and water it at a creek. Amelia knelt beside the water and splashed her face, and when she looked up, Preston saw that some of the haunted look had faded from her eyes. "It is beautiful here," she said. "Wait until you see the mountains." As if on cue, the Medicine Bow Range came into view as they crested a hill. The peaks rose against the sky, still touched with snow despite the summer heat, and Preston felt the familiar sense of homecoming he always experienced when he saw them. "That is where we are going?" Amelia asked, shading her eyes. "My land is in the foothills. Good grazing, plenty of water, and remote enough that we will not be bothered." "Who would bother us?" Preston helped her back onto the horse. "Anyone. Everyone. Out here, you learn that the best neighbors are the ones you never see." They reached the ranch as the sun was setting on the second day. The cabin was small but well built, constructed of thick logs that would keep out the winter cold. Nearby stood a sturdy barn and several corrals where Preston's horses raised their heads to watch their arrival. Preston dismounted and helped Amelia down. She stood looking at the cabin, and he tried to see it through her eyes. It was rough, certainly rougher than what she was probably used to in town. One room serving as kitchen, living area and bedroom with a loft above for storage. But it was clean and it was solid and it was home. "I know it is not much," he began, but she cut him off. "It is perfect." She walked up the steps to the porch, and Preston followed, opening the door. The interior was dim and smelled of wood smoke and leather. His bed stood in one corner, a simple frame with a corn husk mattress. A table and two chairs occupied the center of the room, and a stone fireplace took up most of one wall. Shelves held his supplies and his rifle hung above the door. Amelia turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "Where should I put my things?" Preston realized with a start that she had no things. Everything she owned had been left behind in Custer if she had owned anything at all. "We will need to get you some clothes, some other supplies. I will ride into a trading post in a few days. I have no money." "You do not need money. You are my wife." The word felt strange in his mouth. "What is mine is yours." She looked at him for a long moment, and Preston saw tears threatening again, but she blinked them back and nodded. "Thank you again. I seem to keep saying that." "You do not need to thank me every time. This is your home now." But even as he said it, Preston realized the problem. There was only one bed. He glanced at it, then at Amelia, and saw her looking at it too, her cheeks flushing pink. "I will sleep in the barn," he said quickly. "You take the bed." "I cannot take your bed. This is your home. And you are recovering from nearly being hanged. You need proper rest." He grabbed his blanket from the chair where he had dropped it. "I have slept in worse places. The barn is comfortable enough." Before she could protest further, he headed outside. The barn was familiar territory, and he made himself a bed in the hay loft, trying not to think about the woman in his cabin, in his bed, wearing the same torn dress she had been sentenced to die in. Over the next few days, they fell into a careful dance around each other. Preston rose before dawn to tend to the horses and cattle, and when he returned to the cabin for breakfast, Amelia would have food ready. She had found his supplies and made do with what was there, cooking simple meals that were far better than anything Preston had made for himself. She cleaned the cabin until it shone, organized his chaotic shelves, and mended the tears in his spare shirt without being asked. She moved quietly, as if afraid to take up too much space, and Preston found himself watching her when he thought she was not looking. There was a grace to her movements despite the lingering fear he could see in her eyes. She startled easily, flinching whenever he moved too quickly or raised his voice. She kept to the edges of rooms, always positioning herself where she could see the door. These were the habits of someone who had lived with violence, and they made Preston's chest tight with anger at the man who had done this to her. On the fourth day, Preston rode to a trading post 15 miles away and returned with packages wrapped in brown paper. Amelia was hanging laundry when he arrived, her sleeves rolled up and her hair tied back with a piece of string. "I brought you some things," he said, dismounting. She wiped her hands on her skirt and approached cautiously. Preston handed her the packages, and she opened them slowly. Inside were two dresses, one a practical brown calico and the other a dark blue cotton. There were also undergarments, a nightgown, a warm shawl, and a pair of sturdy boots. "Preston, this is too much. This must have cost a fortune." "It cost what it cost. You need clothes." She held the blue dress up to herself, and a smile crossed her face, the first genuine smile he had seen from her. It transformed her, making her look younger, less haunted. It is beautiful. There is more. He pulled out a smaller package. Thought you might want these. Inside were a hairbrush, pins, a small mirror, and a bar of lavender soap. Amelia's eyes widened and she looked up at him with an expression he could not quite read. You noticed, she said softly. Noticed what? The smell. When you pulled me onto your horse that first day. I smelled it on you, recognized it later. Lavender. Your wife, Preston nodded, his throat tight. She loved it. I had not bought any in years, but when I saw it at the trading post, I thought you might like it. Amelia set the packages down carefully and stepped closer to him. Thank you. For all of this, for everything you have done. You do not need to keep thanking me. I do, though, because you gave me my life back when you had no reason to. You married a stranger, brought her to your home, treated her with more kindness than she has known in years. So yes, Preston Reed, I do need to keep thanking you. She was standing close enough now that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could smell the wood smoke that clung to her hair. Preston felt something shift in his chest, a crack in the wall he had built around his heart. You are welcome, he said quietly. That night, Amelia wore the nightgown and appeared on the porch of the cabin just as Preston was heading to the barn. Wait, she called. He turned and his breath caught at the sight of her. The white nightgown was modest, covering her from neck to ankles, but it made her look softer somehow, more vulnerable. This is ridiculous, she said. You sleeping in the barn while I take your bed. The cabin is large enough for both of us. We are married after all, even if it is not a real marriage. Amelia, I do not think that is a good idea. Why not? Do you think I am afraid of you? She descended the porch steps and walked toward him. I am not. You have had every opportunity to hurt me and you have not. You have been nothing but respectful and kind. So please come back inside. Sleep in your own bed. I will make a pallet on the floor. You will not sleep on the floor. Then we will share the bed, with our clothes on like proper strangers. She smiled slightly. It is big enough for both of us if we stay on our own sides. Preston knew he should refuse, knew that sharing a bed with this woman would only complicate things. But he was tired of the barn, tired of the distance he had put between them, and tired of pretending he did not want to be closer to her. All right, he said, but I sleep on the side closest to the door. They worked out an arrangement that night. Preston changed in the barn and came to bed after Amelia was already settled, lying on the far edge of the mattress with her back to his side. He lay down carefully, leaving as much space between them as possible, and stared at the ceiling. Good night, Preston, she whispered. Good night, Amelia. He thought he would never fall asleep with her so close, but the comfort of his own bed and the soft sound of her breathing lulled him into the deepest sleep he had experienced in years. Over the following weeks, they developed a rhythm. Preston taught Amelia how to handle the horses, and she proved to be a natural with them, gentle but firm. She learned to milk the cow he kept for fresh milk and butter, gathered eggs from the chickens, and helped him repair a section of fence that had been damaged over the winter. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains. Sometimes they talked, and Preston learned about her life before her marriage. She had been a teacher in a small school, loved reading and music, and had dreams of traveling to the cities back east. Her husband had seemed kind during their courtship, but that had changed quickly after the wedding. Preston told her about his own past, about his first wife Elizabeth and the baby they had lost. He told her about the farm in Kansas, about the decision to leave everything behind and start over. He had not spoken about Elizabeth in years, and it felt both painful and liberating to share her memory with someone. One evening in late August, after a particularly long day of rounding up horses, Preston came back to the cabin to find Amelia sitting at the table with a book open in front of her. She looked up as he entered and he saw that she had been crying. "What is wrong?" He was at her side immediately, scanning her for injury. "Nothing is wrong. I am being foolish." She wiped her eyes. "I found this book on your shelf, poetry. I used to read poetry to my students, and I have not done so in so long. It just brought back memories." Preston glanced at the book. It had been Elizabeth's, one of the few things of hers he had kept. "My wife loved poetry. She would read to me in the evenings. I never understood most of it, but I loved listening to her voice." Amelia touched the page gently. "She had good taste. This is a beautiful collection. Read to me," Preston said impulsively. "What? Read to me? Like you did for your students. I would like to hear it." So she did. As the candles burned low, Amelia read poem after poem, her voice soft but clear. Preston sat across from her and listened, and for the first time since Elizabeth died, he felt at peace. When she finally closed the book, it was late into the night. They prepared for bed in their usual careful way, maintaining their respective sides of the mattress. But that night, Preston woke to find Amelia pressed against him, her head on his shoulder and her arm across his chest. She was still asleep, and Preston knew he should move away, should maintain the boundaries they had established. But she fit against him perfectly, and she looked peaceful for the first time since he had met her. So he stayed still, barely breathing, and let himself enjoy the warmth of another person beside him. When morning came, she woke with a start and realized where she was. "I am so sorry. I did not mean to. I must have moved in my sleep." "It is all right," Preston said, and meant it. After that, the invisible line between them began to blur. They still maintained a careful distance during the day, but at night, they would wake to find themselves tangled together. Neither of them mentioned it, but neither of them moved apart anymore either. September brought the first hints of autumn, and with it came a problem. Preston needed to take his horses to the army fort to fulfill a contract he had made earlier in the year. It would require a week-long trip, maybe more, and he was reluctant to leave Amelia alone. "I will be fine," she insisted when he raised his concerns. "I can handle the ranch for a week. I know how to shoot, how to take care of the animals, and it is not as if we have close neighbors who might bother me. That is what worries me. If something happens, there is no one to help. Preston, I survived 3 years with a violent husband and nearly being hanged. I can survive a week alone on a ranch." She touched his arm. "Besides, you need to fulfill this contract. We need the money for winter supplies." He could not argue with that logic. So 3 days later, Preston set out with a string of 20 horses, leaving Amelia standing on the porch waving goodbye. He looked back more times than he cared to admit, each time seeing her grow smaller in the distance until finally, she disappeared from view. The trip to Fort Sanders took 4 days, and Preston conducted his business as quickly as possible. The army was pleased with the horses, and he received payment promptly. But instead of taking his time on the return journey as he usually did, Preston pushed hard, eager to get back. He arrived at the ranch in the evening of the 6th day, riding faster as the cabin came into view. Smoke rose from the chimney, and he could see the glow of lamplight through the windows. Everything looked peaceful, but Preston did not relax until he dismounted, and Amelia appeared in the doorway. "You are back early," she said, but her smile told him she was pleased. The business went faster than expected. Preston tied his horse and climbed the porch steps. "Everything all right here? Everything is fine. A bit lonely, perhaps, but fine." She stepped aside to let him enter, and the cabin was warm and welcoming, filled with the smell of something delicious cooking. "I made stew. Are you hungry?" Preston realized he was starving, having eaten nothing but jerky and hardtack for the past week. Starving. As they ate, Amelia told him about her week. She had managed everything well, even dealing with a minor injury to one of the horses. She had spent her evenings reading and had started sketching the mountain views in the margins of an old ledger she found. "Show me," Preston said, and she brought out the ledger shyly. Her sketches were good, capturing the lines of the mountains and the way the light fell across the valley. Preston turned the pages carefully, seeing his home through her eyes, and realized with a jolt that she was happy here. This was not just a refuge for her anymore. It was home. "These are beautiful," he said. "I used to draw when I was younger. I had forgotten how much I enjoyed it." She took the ledger back, her fingers brushing his. "I am glad you are back. The cabin felt too empty without you." Preston looked at her across the table, at the way the lamplight caught in her dark hair, at the softness in her eyes. "I missed you too," he admitted. The words hung in the air between them, heavier than any they had spoken before. Amelia's breath caught, and Preston saw the pulse fluttering at her throat. "Preston," she whispered. He stood and moved around the table, and she rose to meet him. They stood inches apart, and Preston could feel the heat radiating from her body. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he reached up and cupped her face in his hand. "Tell me to stop," he said. "If you do not want this, tell me to stop." Instead of answering, Amelia closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was tentative at first, almost shy, but then Preston pulled her closer and deepened the kiss. She melted against him, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders, and Preston felt 7 years of loneliness and grief begin to crack open. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Amelia pressed her forehead against his chest. "I did not think I could feel this way again. After everything that happened, I thought I was broken." "You are not broken. You are the strongest person I have ever met." Preston tilted her face up to look at him. "You saved me, Amelia. I was just existing before you came into my life. You made me want to live again." "You saved my life," she countered. "No, you saved mine first. You just did not know it." They made love that night, slowly and gently, learning each other in the lamplight. Preston was careful with her, mindful of her past, and Amelia showed him that she was not afraid, that she trusted him completely. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Preston felt whole for the first time in 7 years. "I love you," Amelia whispered against his chest. Preston stroked her hair, breathing in the lavender scent that now meant her, not just memories. "I love you too. I think I have since the moment I saw you on that platform, refusing to bow your head." "We are quite a pair," she said with a soft laugh. "A lonely cowboy and a condemned woman. We are more than that now. We are a family." The words seemed to settle over them like a blessing, and they fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, no longer strangers but truly husband and wife. The autumn passed in a golden haze of happiness. Preston had never felt so content, waking each morning with Amelia beside him, working the ranch together during the day, and falling into bed exhausted and satisfied each night. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, made love by firelight, and built a life that was richer than anything Preston had imagined possible. In October, a supply wagon came through, and Preston bought Amelia a proper winter coat, more fabric for dresses, and a box of watercolors so she could add color to her sketches. Her face lit up when she saw the paints, and she kissed him right there in front of the wagon driver, not caring who saw. In November, the first snow fell, and they woke to a world transformed in white. Amelia pressed her face to the window like a child, marveling at the beauty of it, and Preston felt his heart swell with love for her joy. They celebrated Thanksgiving with a simple meal of venison and root vegetables, but it felt like a feast. As they sat together, Preston reached across the table and took Amelia's hand. "I am thankful for you," he said. "For your courage, your strength, and the light you have brought back into my life." I am thankful for you, Amelia replied, for seeing me when no one else did, for giving me a reason to live when I thought I had none, for loving me even though you did not have to. I could not help but love you. As winter closed in, they spent more time inside, and Preston taught Amelia to play chess with a set that had belonged to his father. She was a quick learner and soon beat him as often as he beat her. They read together, her head on his shoulder, and made plans for the spring. I want to expand the garden, Amelia said one evening. Plant more vegetables, maybe some flowers. Would that be all right? This is your home too. You can do whatever you want with it. Our home, she corrected. Everything we do together now. In December, Amelia felt ill for several mornings in a row, and Preston worried that she had caught some sickness. But when she finally told him the truth, his knees nearly gave out. I am with child, she said, her voice trembling. I am certain of it now. Preston pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed with emotion. Joy and fear warred within him, memories of Elizabeth and the baby they had lost threatening to dampen his happiness. But Amelia was not Elizabeth, and this was a different time, a different chance. Are you happy? She asked, pulling back to look at his face. I am terrified, he admitted. But yes, I am happy, so happy, Amelia. She smiled, tears streaming down her face. I am scared too. After everything I went through, I never thought I would want a child, but I want this. I want our baby. I want to build a family with you. We will get through this together. I will take care of you, both of you. The winter seemed endless as Preston worried over Amelia's health. He rode through a blizzard to fetch a midwife from a homestead 20 miles away, a capable woman named Mrs. Harper, who agreed to check on Amelia regularly and be present for the birth. Mrs. Harper examined Amelia and declared her healthy and strong. This baby will come in June, I expect. You take care of yourself, eat well, rest when you need to, and you will be just fine. Preston took her advice to heart, sometimes to Amelia's amusement. He would not let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest in the afternoons, and cooked meals when he thought she was too tired. She teased him about being overprotective, but he could see that she appreciated his care. As her belly grew round with their child, Preston found himself falling even deeper in love with her. She glowed with happiness despite the discomforts of pregnancy, and her joy was infectious. They spent evenings discussing names, arguing playfully over whether the baby would have her green eyes or his brown ones, and making plans for the future. Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it transformed the valley into an explosion of green and wildflowers. Amelia was 6 months along by then, moving more slowly but still insisting on helping with the lighter ranch work. She planted her expanded garden, and Preston built a cradle by the fireplace, sanding the wood until it was smooth as silk. In May, a rider came to the ranch, the first visitor they had received. Preston met him in the yard, rifle in hand, until he recognized the man as a deputy from Custer. Mr. Reed, the deputy said, tipping his hat. I am sorry to bother you. I am just making rounds, checking on folks in the territory. Wanted to make sure everything was all right with you and your wife. Everything is fine. What is this about? The deputy dismounted, looking uncomfortable. There has been some talk in town about how you married Mrs. Jenkins to save her from hanging. Some folks thought maybe it was not a real marriage, that you were just being charitable. The sheriff wanted me to check, make sure she was not being held here against her will. Preston felt anger rise in his chest, but before he could speak, Amelia appeared on the porch. Her pregnancy was obvious now, and she walked with one hand supporting her back. I am here of my own free will, deputy, she said firmly. Preston is my husband in every sense of the word. We are expecting a child, as you can see. Please tell the sheriff and anyone else who is interested that I am exactly where I want to be. The deputy's face reddened. "Yes, madam, I can see that. I apologize for the intrusion." After he left, Preston held Amelia close, feeling her heart beating against his. "Are there any regrets," he asked quietly, "about the life we have here, away from everything?" "Not a single one. You are my life now, Preston. You and this baby, nothing else matters." June arrived hot and dry, and Amelia grew more uncomfortable as her time approached. Mrs. Harper moved into the cabin during the last week, and Preston found himself pacing constantly, unable to focus on anything but his wife. Labor began on a warm afternoon, and Preston sent a prayer to whatever God might be listening. The hours that followed were the longest of his life. He stayed by Amelia's side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, and feeling utterly helpless as she labored to bring their child into the world. "You are doing so well," he told her over and over. "You are so strong. I love you so much." When the baby finally came, it was near midnight. The cry that filled the cabin was the most beautiful sound Preston had ever heard, and when Mrs. Harper placed the baby in his arms, he wept openly. "A son," Mrs. Harper announced. "A fine, healthy boy." Preston looked down at the tiny face, at the shock of dark hair and the miniature fingers that gripped his own, and fell in love all over again. He carried the baby to Amelia, who was exhausted but glowing with joy. "A son," she whispered, reaching for the baby. "We have a son, Preston. They named him Thomas after Preston's father, and he was perfect in every way." Preston had never known he could feel such overwhelming love, such fierce protectiveness. He would have died for this child, for Amelia, would have fought heaven and earth to keep them safe. As Amelia recovered from the birth, Preston took over every aspect of caring for her and the baby. He changed diapers, walked the floor with Thomas when he cried at night, and made sure Amelia ate and rested. She recovered quickly, strong as Mrs. Harper had predicted, and soon they were navigating the challenges of new parenthood together. One night, a few weeks after Thomas was born, Preston sat in the rocking chair he had built with his son sleeping on his chest. Amelia came to stand beside him, her hand on his shoulder, and they looked down at the miracle they had created. "You remember what you said?" Amelia asked softly. "On our wedding day, you said I did not owe you anything, that I just needed to heal. I remember. You were wrong. I owed you everything. My life, my happiness, my future. But you gave me more than that. You gave me a reason to believe in love again. You showed me that not all men use their strength to hurt, that some use it to protect. You saved me, Preston, in every way a person can be saved." Preston reached up and took her hand. "You saved me first. I was dying inside, even if my body kept breathing. You brought me back to life. You made me want to be a better man. You were already a good man. You just needed someone to see it." They stood like that for a long time, the three of them, a family forged from desperation and loneliness, but held together by love stronger than anything Preston had ever known. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were harsh winters that tested their resources, a bout of illness that swept through the valley and left Thomas feverish for a week, and the constant hard work that came with running a ranch. But through it all, Preston and Amelia faced everything together. Thomas grew into a bright, curious boy who loved the horses and followed his father everywhere. When he was 3, Amelia gave birth to a daughter they named Grace, who had her mother's green eyes and her father's stubbornness. 2 years later came another son, Samuel, who was quiet and thoughtful from the start. The cabin expanded as the family grew, with Preston adding rooms and a proper second floor. The ranch prospered as well, and Preston's reputation for breeding quality horses spread throughout Wyoming and beyond. They were never wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. On their 10th anniversary, Preston and Amelia stood together on the porch as they had done so many evenings, watching the sun set over the Medicine Bow Mountains. The children were inside, finally settled after much negotiation, and the night was peaceful. "You ever think about that day?" Amelia asked, leaning against him. "When you rode into Custer and saw me on that platform?" "Sometimes. I think about how close I came to riding right past. I almost did, you know. I almost decided it was not my business." "What made you stop?" "Your eyes. Even with that noose around your neck, you refused to look down. You faced death with your head held high, and I thought to myself, that is someone worth knowing. That is someone worth saving." Amelia turned to face him, reaching up to touch his face. The years had added lines around his eyes and silver to his hair, but to her, he was still the man who had offered his hand when the whole world wanted to see her hang. "You know what I think," she said. "I think you were supposed to ride into that town that day. I think we were supposed to find each other, two broken people who could make each other whole. It was not chance, Preston. It was fate. Maybe it was. All I know is that I would do it again in a heartbeat. Marry you 1,000 times in front of that whole town or God himself. You are my life, Amelia, you and our children. Everything good I have, I owe to you. We owe it to each other. That is what marriage is it not? Two people saving each other over and over every single day." Preston kissed her then, soft and sweet, a promise renewed. When they pulled apart, Amelia smiled and took his hand, placing it on her stomach. "I have news," she said. "Another baby, due in the spring." Preston felt joy surge through him, mixed with the familiar thread of fear he always experienced when Amelia was pregnant. But they had done this 3 times already, and each time she had come through strong and healthy. He had faith that she would do so again. "Another blessing," he said, pulling her close. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky. That day in Custer, we both got our miracle." That night, lying in bed with Amelia curled against him, Preston thought about the man he had been 10 years ago. Hollow, lonely, going through the motions of living without truly being alive. He thought about the scared woman on the platform, fighting for dignity even in the face of death. They had saved each other, just as Amelia said. But more than that, they had built something beautiful from the ashes of their separate tragedies. They had created a family, a home, a life filled with love and laughter and purpose. The baby came in April, another daughter they named Rose. By then, Thomas was 11 and already talking about running the ranch someday. Grace was 8 and could ride as well as any grown cowhand. Samuel was 6 and spent his days reading every book he could get his hands on, reminding Preston of his own father. As Preston held Rose in the rocking chair that had cradled all his children, he marveled at the fullness of his life. 4 beautiful children, a wife he loved more with each passing day, and a ranch that provided for them all. It was more than he had ever dreamed possible. Amelia came to sit beside him, and together they watched their daughter sleep. Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled at the moon. It was the sound of the Wild West, untamed and beautiful, and Preston knew he would not want to be anywhere else. "Tell me what you are thinking," Amelia said softly. "I am thinking about how you saved me. How a woman I married to save from hanging ended up being the one who truly did the saving. I was the one who needed rescuing, Amelia. I just did not know it until I saw you. Then we rescued each other, and we will keep doing it every day for the rest of our lives." Preston nodded because she was right. That was what love was, he had learned. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments, though those had their place. Real love was the daily choice to be there, to support, to encourage, to hold on even when things were hard. It was waking up next to the same person every morning and choosing them again. It was working together to build something that would last beyond your own years. It was creating a family and a legacy of love that would ripple forward through time. Years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Thomas grew tall and strong, taking over more of the ranch work until Preston could finally step back and let his son lead. Grace married a homesteader from the next valley, a good man who reminded Preston of himself at that age. Samuel went off to school back east, his brilliant mind hungry for knowledge, though he always came home for Christmas. Rose stayed at the ranch, helping her mother and declaring that she would never leave the mountains. Preston suspected there was a young man involved, one of the hands they hired for the summer roundups, but he decided to wait and see how that played out. Preston and Amelia grew older together, their hair turning gray, their movements slower but their love as strong as ever. They had been married for 25 years when Preston had a health scare, a pain in his chest that laid him low for several days. The doctor from town came and told him to take it easy, and Preston found himself thinking about mortality for the first time in years. "I am not ready," he told Amelia one night as they lay in bed. "I am not ready to leave you." "Then do not," she said simply. "Stay with me. We have years yet, Preston Reed. We have grandchildren to meet and more sunsets to watch. So you rest, you take care of yourself, and you stay right here with me." He did as she commanded because she was right. He was not done yet, and when the first grandchild arrived, Thomas and his wife's son, Preston held the baby and felt the cycle of life completing itself. This child would carry on their legacy, would inherit the ranch they had built and the love they had nurtured. More grandchildren followed, until the cabin rang with laughter during holidays and family gatherings. Preston and Amelia would sit on the porch, watching their children and grandchildren play, and marvel at what they had created from that single moment of courage in a town square so many years ago. "You remember what you said to the sheriff?" Amelia asked on their 30th anniversary. "When you offered to marry me, I said a lot of things that day. You said you knew enough. You did not know me, but you knew enough to risk everything. What did you know, Preston? What did you see that made you so certain?" Preston thought about it, really thought about it, trying to remember the man he had been at that moment. "I saw myself," he finally said. "Someone who had been beaten down by life but refused to give up. Someone who deserved a second chance. And I thought, if I can give that to someone else, maybe I can give it to myself too." Amelia's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "That is the most beautiful thing you have ever said to me. It is the truth. You were my second chance, Amelia, at life, at love, at everything. And I will spend every remaining day I have being grateful that I rode into Custer on that July morning in 1876. They celebrated their 30th anniversary with their whole family gathered around them. Thomas gave a toast, speaking about the love and dedication his parents had shown, how they had built something lasting from nothing. Grace read a poem she had written about second chances and true love. Samuel, home from his teaching position at a university in Boston, spoke about how his parents had taught him what it meant to be a good person. And Rose simply hugged them both and whispered, "Thank you for showing me what love should look like." As the party continued around them, Preston pulled Amelia aside. "Come with me," he said. He led her outside, away from the noise and celebration, to the small hillside where he had buried Elizabeth and their baby so many years ago. The graves were well tended, with flowers growing wild around them, and Preston stood looking at them for a long moment. "I want you to know," he said to Amelia, "that loving you does not mean I forgot her. She was my first love, and she gave me a glimpse of what happiness could be. But you, Amelia, you taught me what it truly means to build a life with someone. You showed me that love could survive hardship, that it could grow deeper with time. I am grateful for what I had with Elizabeth, but I am even more grateful for what I have with you." Amelia took his hand. "I know. And I am grateful to her, in a way. She chose a good man, and she helped shape you into the person you are. We can honor her memory while still celebrating what we have built together." They stood there for a while longer, paying respect to the past while embracing the present. Then they walked back to the cabin hand in hand, ready to rejoin their family and continue the celebration. Preston lived to see all his children married and settled, to meet 10 grandchildren, and to celebrate 40 years of marriage to Amelia. He died peacefully in his sleep one winter night, with Amelia beside him and their children gathered around. His last words were to tell his wife that he loved her, that she had been his greatest adventure, and that he would wait for her on the other side. Amelia lived another 5 years after Preston passed, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, tending her garden, and painting the mountains that she had come to love so deeply. She never remarried, saying that she had already experienced the great love of her life and needed no other. She died on a summer evening, sitting on the porch of the cabin and watching the sunset, just as she and Preston had done thousands of times before. The family found her there the next morning, peaceful and still, with a smile on her face and a sketch of the mountains in her lap. They buried her next to Preston on the hillside, under the pine trees and with a view of the valley they had loved. The headstone reads simply, "Amelia Reed. Beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She saved a lonely cowboy and built a legacy of love." The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through the generations. Thomas's children and grandchildren worked the land, raised horses, and told stories of their great-grandparents, the woman who faced death with courage, and the man who saw her worth when no one else did. And on summer evenings, when the wind whispers through the Medicine Bow Mountains, some say you can still see 2 figures standing on the porch of the old cabin, hand in hand, watching the sun set over the valley they had claimed as their own. A lonely cowboy and the woman he saved, who had actually saved him first, forever bound by a love that death itself could not break. Their story became legend in Wyoming, told and retold until it was hard to separate fact from fiction. But those who knew them best, who had seen the way Preston looked at Amelia and the way she smiled at him, knew that the truth was better than any legend could ever be. They had been 2 broken people who found each other at exactly the right moment. They had married as strangers, survived as partners, and thrived as soulmates. They had built a family, a home, and a love that would echo through the generations, proving that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is reach out to a stranger and offer them hope. Preston Reed had thought he was saving Amelia Jenkins that day in Custer. But in reality, she had saved him the moment he saw her courage in the face of death. She had reminded him what it meant to be alive, to fight, to love. And together they had created something beautiful, something lasting, something that would endure long after they were both gone. That was the real story. Not of a rescue, but of 2 people saving each other over and over again, every single day, for 40 years. It was a story of second chances, of courage, of choosing love even when life had given you every reason not to. It was the story of a lonely cowboy and the woman who made him whole, told in the wild beauty of Wyoming, where legends were born and true love could still change everything. And if you listen carefully on quiet nights in the Medicine Bow Mountains, you might hear the echo of laughter, the soft murmur of conversation, and the sound of 2 people who found in each other everything they had been searching for. A lonely cowboy married a stranger to save her, then realized she saved him first, and together they proved that love, real love, was the greatest adventure of all.